I'm a psychologist, and I thought I would share with you my observations that I've made working with people that have OCD, that are autistic, and actually people that have both autism and OCD. So, what you might not know is that OCD and autism are actually, they co-occur at quite high rates. It's not always the case that a person with autism will present with OCD, and it's not always the case that a person with OCD will present with autism, but they actually are out in the real world generally diagnosed together somewhat commonly. Just like with ADHD, oppositional defiance is typically co-diagnosed quite commonly. So in this video, I wanted to just share the differences that I've observed between a patient that presents with autism, a patient that presents with OCD, and one that has both. So what it really comes down to is, actually, let me start again. I'm going to assume you know what autism is, and I'm going to assume you know what OCD is, and I'm going to assume that you know that they both present with highly ritualized behaviors. So a person with autism might do the same thing over and over and over again. They like routine. A person with OCD might do the same thing, but the key is the difference for the underlying reason for why. And this is how you can tell the difference between an autism case and an OCD case, is that a person with autism will have a ritual or a routine that they have a preference for. They actually just prefer to do it. They prefer to do the same thing in the same way. Whereas a person with OCD, their ritual is really their obsession or compulsion to prevent a feared outcome. They don't necessarily want to do the ritual. They don't necessarily want to check the door handle 100 times before leaving the house, or check the car door 100 times before walking away from their car. They just have to prevent a feared outcome. That's one of the main differences. But even if a person with autism has the rituals that make it so that they want to prevent a feared outcome, the other way to really tell the difference I've found is in the sensory differences between the two people. So there are 5 senses in the human body. Let's see if I can get them all. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. They get them all? In a person with autism, those 5 senses will be different. So they might have elevated sensitivity to touch. So what that practically translates to is they might have certain fabrics of clothing they just can't cope with on their skin, right? Or they might have a certain taste that they just can't cope with, like spearmint or lemon, and they can only eat bland foods. A person with OCD typically does not have the differences. They typically can have generally any fabric of clothing on, or any food and all that, and it just comes really down to their preference. And the third thing I've noticed that really sets the two apart, is that a person with autism will have very specific interests. They'll have 2 or 3 things that they can hyperfixate on, and they have very elevated knowledge in 1 or 2 domains. A person with OCD typically has a general and broad range of interests that wouldn't go over and above what you would anticipate in a neurotypical person, in a way. And so that's what I've noticed, is that a person with OCD will have just a nominal range of interests, and their primary concern is their ritualized obsessions and compulsions to prevent a feared outcome. So those are the 3 things I've noticed that really set them apart. And if a person has both the sensory differences, they have the ritualized behaviors out of preference, but also have the ritualized behaviors out of to prevent a feared outcome, and that prevention of a feared outcome engulfs many hours throughout their day or week, then that's probably really what we're going to get, the combined OCD and autism presentation, where they still might have restricted interests, they still might have a very strict routine, but they also have ritualized routines to prevent a feared outcome, like checking the door handle 100 times before leaving the house, that go over and above what would be a normal amount of checking of the door handle or whatever the OCDs are. And that's where a person can have both autism and OCD. Anyway, that's what I've noticed so far. So in my real world cases of supporting people with this. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more.